In this lesson, we'll go over basic formula creation in Microsoft Excel. We'll also discuss using a couple of Excel shortcut functions. We'll talk about the sum function and also the average function. So in this case, with this example, we have a fruit stand, and the individual who owns this fruit stand or manages the fruit stand is keeping track of how much volume in dollar amounts each of the fruits has sold. So in this case, we have $155 worth of apples for January, and so on for oranges and plums. And so the first thing we want to do is create a total, because Joe is concerned about, how much total dollars he's had this month. So we're going to create a formula. Now, when we create formulas in Excel, we can create formulas using constants or variables. And as the term implies, a constant doesn't change, and a variable represents something else and does change. And whenever possible, we usually want to use variables in our formulas, not constants. And let me explain why. So we're going to create a formula that's going to add up apples, oranges, and plums here. To start creating a formula in Excel, we'll start with a formula prefix, and most often we use the equals. That tells Excel that what's going to come in this cell is going to be a formula. So using constants, I would just type in the values of the dollar amounts for each fruit. So I would type 155 and then plus 255 plus 235. I press enter. Now I do see indeed the result of 155 plus 255 plus 235. When I click back into that cell in the formula bar, or sometimes called the cell contents area, we'll see the actual formula there, 155 plus 255 plus 235. And technically that is correct, but that doesn't really allow you to use the power of Excel. Let me explain why. If, for instance, I had a typo when I typed in the dollar amount for oranges, and really it was 355, if I make that change, notice that my total did not change. And it didn't change because it uses constants. So always and forever, it's 155 plus 255 plus 235. Now, we don't want to have to go in and edit every formula every time we make a change. So the solution to that is to not use constants in your formulas, but variables. And of course, variables make sense, and variables are going to be the cell addresses. So really what we're going to say here is B4 plus B5 plus B6. And so we'll enter the formula again that way. B4, and capitalization does not matter when you're entering formulas this way. B4 plus B5 plus B6, and Excel shows you the actual cells involved in that formula, so we can see, yes, indeed, these are the correct cells. So I'll press enter, and this time I see a correct result of 745. I look at the formula bar up here, and it again shows me the cell addresses. Now, again, because I've used variables in my formula, I can change this back to 255, and the total changes to reflect the value in the cell as opposed to the value itself. Now, let's assume that what Joe is really interested in doing here, because this is April 1st, he wants a quarterly report. And so here he wants a column for March and a column for April. So rather than typing March and April, I'm going to use the shortcut, the fill handle, and Excel understands that if it sees Jan, it probably thinks I'm meaning months. So if I go to the bottom right-hand corner and drag over, it'll automatically increment the months, and that works for days of the week as well. I'm going to go ahead and put total here because I want the total for apples in sales for the entire quarter. Now I'm going to be a little lazy here, and I'm just going to use the fill handle just to put in some numbers there, and I'll make a couple of changes here just so I'll end up with different totals when I'm done here. Okay. Now, before I put in the totals for the other months and also for the quarterly total for each fruit, I want to talk about using the sum function as opposed to entering a formula longhand as I did here. This formula is great, but the problem would be, what if I forgot about a fruit? And so in this case, let's assume I forgot about pears. So I'm going to right-click on the row indicator and choose insert, and I'm going to type in pears, and let's just put in 300 for pears all the way across here. Now you can see what happened here is obviously the 300 is not included in the formula because the formula reads B4 plus B5 plus B7. Notice it used to say B6, but when I inserted the row, it says, oh, he's working with plums, apples, oranges, and plums moved to a new location, so I'm going to adjust the formula for that. Well, really what I wanted it to do was to add up all of the fruits between apples and plums, and that way if I inserted pears or cherries or any other fruit, it would automatically be included in the total. And that is something that we can accomplish through the sum function. So I'm going to delete that formula that I entered longhand, and I'm going to use the shortcut, the AutoSum or the sum function. Now you'll notice that you'll find the AutoSum tool right there on the Home tab, and I can just click the AutoSum, and Excel automatically inserts the sum function, and it tries to create the formula based on all the values it sees above it, B4 through B7. And that is exactly what I want it to do, so I'll go ahead and press enter. Now if I were to insert another fruit here, I'm not actually going to, but I just want you to see in this case that the sum function now says B4 through B8. And so if I added additional fruits, as long as they were between apples and plums, they would be included in that function. I'll go ahead and delete that row. Okay, so I want to go ahead and put in a total for apples for the quarter, and I can use the AutoSum function. And notice that there are no values above it, so it says, well, he must be wanting to add all the numbers to the left, which he does. So I'll press enter. Okay, now we'll talk about in a future lesson here about when formulas are copyable and when they are not. In this case, these two formulas are both copyable because I want them to do the same thing where they're going that they do where they're at. In other words, in this formula, it adds up the 4 values immediately above it. And I do indeed want that to do the same formula, the same thing for February and March. So I can be lazy and use that fill handle and drag all the way across. And notice when I go into column C, the formula that I created there by copying using the fill handle is sum up C4 through C7, column D, D4 through D7, and of course column E, the same thing. Well, the formula for the total for each fruit for the quarter is also a copyable formula because I want it to do essentially the same thing here, add up the 3 numbers to the left of it that it's doing here. So I can drag down with the fill handle, or if there were 100 or 200 different kinds of fruits here or whatever I was trying to add up here, I can just double click the fill handle and it automatically copies the formula down for me. All right, one more function I'd like to show you in this lesson, and that's the average function. So I'd like to know on average what my sales volume would be, how many dollars worth of apples I sold for the quarter. Well, I could create a formula longhand if I wanted to, but I really want to take advantage of Excel's functions. And there is an average function, very easy to use average function. It's available right here on this AutoSum tool. If I click the drop-down list for it, I can find average right there. Now the problem is when I first click it, it assumes that I want to average all 4 values to the left of where I'm putting in this formula. In this case, that is not correct because that would include the total and it would give me an incorrect average. But I can easily adjust this and say, no, I don't want you to include column E, I want you to stop at D. So now I'm saying average up B4 through D4. I have the average sales of apples for each month for that quarter, and I can do the same thing. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this formula, and I have now an average monthly sales of $1,008. We have an average of pears, 300, which makes sense because each one was 300. Okay, we will cover additional formulas. In the next lesson, we'll talk about when to use constants in your formulas, and we'll also introduce you to the absolute reference. And all of these things that we're talking about are explained very, very easily in detail in my workbooks that are available on Amazon. Thank you very much.